Norwich City are out of the Premier League relegation zone thanks to a memorable 3-0 win at Watford that we are here to review on the latest edition of the PinkUn Norwich City Podcast. Dave Freezer here alongside Paddy, Davitt and Connor Southwell. We come to you in association with Future Radio 107.8 FM as always. And boys, we have got a really positive one to review here, haven't we? We're recording this Monday morning. We wanted to sort of let the rest of the weekend play out, and Pad, the results maybe have taken a little bit of a shine off, but I wouldn't say too much.
No, not really. I think all you can do if you're Dean Smith, I'm going to sound like a manager now, but is control what is in your gift, and that is brilliantly over the last two games, beating Everton at home, followed that up with a night I think we'll remember for quite a while, really, for a lot of reasons, that has put the cat amongst the proverbial. And yeah, fair play. Newcastle did come back and win at Leeds, but then that keeps Leeds in there, which, to take Dean Smith post-match from Friday night, he felt if they could get 6 points from those two games, which they did, you're not just pulling in the 3 or 4 clubs that are already around you. You look at the table, Everton and Leeds, maybe you're pulling them in as well. And obviously Leeds getting beat by a relegation rival, they're most firmly in the mix, as I see it. And Burnley getting a draw at Arsenal. Well, I didn't see the game, but I don't think I was missing much. But I'm not overly concerned with Burnley now, really, if I'm honest. I mean, they've got games in hand, but they look like a club who are racked with all that sort of ownership element off the pitch. And, I'd much rather be in Norwich's position than Burnley, frankly. So, it's you're right. It is nice to be talking about a feeling that Norwich are actually in the conversation now, rather than they're kind of on the sidelines watching all these other teams not being able to control their own destiny. They firmly did that over the last 2 Premier League games, and now it's a very positive midwinter break, building into, yes, they've got the FA Cup tied at the other side of this, but building into Crystal Palace, Carrow Road, early in February. What an occasion that's going to be, because if they could follow up with a third straight Premier League win, then it is definitely game on.
It is. As we record, Claudio Ranieri is still in a job, although all the noises coming out from the Watford end seem to suggest that he will go. He does have a good relationship with the owners, and he seemed kind of steadfast in his belief that he was going to be given a chance to turn things around after the game, but we shall see. So, yeah, Newcastle win 1 at Leeds on Saturday, and then Burnley managed to get a 0-0 draw at Arsenal on Sunday. So the table's got a sort of nice little organisation to it. Norwich up to 17th on 16 points. Newcastle have got 1 game in hand and are a point behind. Watford have got 2 games in hand, but they're 2 points behind. And Burnley have got 4 games in hand and they're 4 points behind, which is a nice organisation. If they can just keep it like that for a while, then we'll all be reasonably happy. But Connor, how much have you sort of enjoyed the weekend, really, in terms of reflecting on it? I was working on Saturday and I just could not get Sargents on fire, your defence is terrified out of my head. It was just there forever. And all the sort of national reaction and stuff like that. I listened back to the 5 Live post-game coverage and things like that, and you could still hear all the Norwich fans in the background. The stadium's pretty much empty, but there's about 2,300 Norwich fans, and they stayed for ages to just really savour the moment. And there's loads of good stats and stuff that I'm sure we'll start throwing at this game, but it was just an enjoyable occasion, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was traditionally, certainly from my perspective, the type of game that you walk into thinking Norwich are going to lose and lose quite comfortably, because history suggests they do in terms of those big games against teams at the bottom of the Premier League. I was struggling to recall really the last time that kind of situation where they were up against a team in and around them in the Premier League that they managed to record a win in such a big moment. And that was a big moment. I think you mentioned those Norwich fans. I think there'd still be at Vicarage Road now if the stewards would have let them singing and dancing. So, yeah, tremendous night, tremendous occasion. I think it probably exceeded everyone's expectations in terms of how we thought it was going to go. It was cagey. They did have to ride out a tricky period towards the end of the first half in particular. But as soon as they got their noses in front, there was only really one team that I felt was going to win the game, and that was Norwich. So, yeah, credit to them and the way they approached it and their application. And I thought Ranieri actually summed it up the best after the game. Norwich looked like they were playing as a team, and Watford kind of looked like a bunch of individuals. And in the end, the team came out on top. So, a really important victory for the context of what we've spoken about. It's nice to end. I can't even remember the last time Norwich were out of the relegation zone in the Premier League. Obviously, by the start of the season when it's all in alphabetical order. But so yeah, it's been a nice weekend, even with the results maybe taking a little bit of a shine off it. But still a big job to do. And that Palace game, as Pad said, beginning to look absolutely massive now, given the context of what comes after that. But they've got a fighting chance, and I think that's all anyone from a Norwich City persuasion wanted them to give themselves, was a fighting chance. It's kind of the first foot on the mountain that they need to climb, but it's a foot further than 3 other teams, and that's all they need to do. So I think it's hard not to be full of optimism and positivity after the last 2 results and that performance on Friday. Yeah, like you, I've had the Rashica song in my head. I've had numerous others. I've had the sound of drumming in my head. It was a very good night, and we were positioned quite nicely because we were pretty close to the away end. So, it was 2,300 nearly, but it sounded like 23,000 there, and that's good to see. And compared to kind of what we've had to speak about in recent weeks about the supporters and their chants and the gallows humour, this wasn't that. It was togetherness. It was it was a really good night, I think, to be associated with Norwich City.
Yeah, the atmosphere at the home game against Everton was good. But what I liked from this one is that it felt like the away fans were on form before they'd even scored the first goal. They were chanting Angus Gunn's name when he was stood in front of them. That everybody knew that there was a bit of pressure on him. He will have known in the back of his head that people were examining his performance. Kenny McLean, when he comes on for Jacob Sorensen, obviously that's a blow. We'll come on to that more. But they sing Kenny McLean's song. That is support, isn't it? That's how you do it. You G up your players. And then the players respond, they get the goals, and the atmosphere was absolutely brilliant. And I've seen a few people saying they should let the drum into Carrow Road, because that really did set the beat for the jumping around and the singing, and it was great. But Connor, this was literally something you've never seen in your life, wasn't it? Because we have to go back to 1993, when our colleague Pete Raven reckons that Jurassic Park was still in the cinemas for the last time Norwich won an away game in the Premier League by more than 3 goals. That 5-1 at Everton when Efan Okoku scored 4 goals. So, Pad, that sort of shows that, all right, it's only a win at Watford, and that's nice because they'd lost the last 5 against Watford in itself. It's not going and winning at the Etihad or Old Trafford or something like that. But this felt big, and on reflection on Saturday, for me, I put this in the 6 things actually, that all the good parts of last season, them winning the title, the 7-0 over Huddersfield, all the good bits, without the fans, I don't remember them, or I won't remember them anywhere near as much as I'll remember Friday night when the fans made it the occasion that it was, and were combined and united with the players in creating a good occasion. Yeah,
that's an excellent point there. Yeah, as you were talking through that season that isn't really going to be remembered as it should be last season. Can you imagine the Brentford win on the run in, a very tight promotion tussle, and Norwich were excellent that night, but can you imagine the din that game would have been played out with? And then of course the other one that springs in my mind is the masterclass against Huddersfield, how loud, how appreciative that home crowd would have been watching those goals rain in that night. So yeah, it's an excellent point, I think. And I did feel that pre-match they were on it, and they were really driving the team forward, and you need it. And people might think when players talk about, or coaches talk about, we need the fans and the 12th man, woman, child, whatever, those sort of cliches, that it is just that, and that it doesn't matter. But contrast what we saw from off the pitch and on the pitch against Watford to just in recent times, the Palace away game. And we don't need to get into the sort of the issues in terms of squad availability, but just what felt a very big disconnect at that point. And you're not fit to wear the shirt. That was a very well repeated and well heard chant at Selhurst Park. The individual players who got it in the neck, and there was a bit less of that, but still that undercurrent at Charlton maybe even as well in the FA Cup. But for it to roll on to this point in very short order after that period, it just shows you how things can change. And again, it's the old, do the players drive that? Is it up to the players to get the fans on side, or the fans need to almost lift up the players? And I think probably it got to the point where it needed to come from the players, and we saw that at Carrow Road in that first 45 minutes against Everton. And thankfully, they backed it up, because that's the thing that, Connor's alluded to there. How often have you got a performance like that, probably at Carrow Road, and then at this level they go away and the air comes out of the balloon very, very swiftly. But, that first goal, and we'll get into it in more depth, was crucial on the night. But even before that, I thought the manner Norwich started, and the composure and just the control that it was. It looked like, from our vantage, a group of individuals within a team unit who all knew their jobs, understood their jobs, and believed they could carry their jobs out. And great credit to Smith and Shakespeare. I think that with players now coming back, key senior players coming back, they've been able to mould what was a very polished performance, and capped with goals and a clean sheet. So it's tremendous to see. And as I say, at the risk of repeating myself, if they can back that up now against Crystal Palace, then you really feel there's a momentum building to what could be a very special end to the season.
Absolutely. Now, I just wanted to give a couple of shout-outs, unusually. I ended up on a bit of a Facebook conversation with a chap called James Balls, who travels to and from the Newcastle area for home games. And he says that he always listens to the PinkUn podcast on his long journeys in the car. So wanted to say thanks very much to James for listening. And also, I quite often get messages from John Osborne on Twitter, who's always very keen to know when the next edition of the pod is out. So thank you, chaps, very much for listening. And it just reminds me, really, we've done this a few times in the past, but we're always keen to hear from you guys in terms of where you listen to the pod from. If you're listening in somewhere quite quirky, I think we had a few from like a Caribbean island, and somewhere in the sort of very obscure in the Pacific, and Zimbabwe, and all sorts of things before, didn't we? So yeah, if you're listening to the pod in some surprise location, then do get in touch and let us know. But I think we should probably start the Sargent party, really, shouldn't we? Because he's the man who's made all the headlines nationally, really. I mean, the amount of love that Josh Sargent has got for that's something that Jamie Carragher has had to learn to do, isn't it? Say Josh Sargent. You have to leave the little pause between. But he's now getting a lot of really positive attention. A little bit embarrassing, Connor, I think, for the USA, that he'd not been in the last two squads. They actually confirmed their squad they've got 3 World Cup qualifiers. First one's on Friday against El Salvador, I think. He is on standby, but 8 minutes after they'd named the squad, he scores his first Premier League goal and is getting all that love and praise for how brilliantly he managed to squeeze it in. Then he goes and scores the really impressive header as well. But the fact that if you're a USA fan and you see them playing on Friday, but you've seen a guy who scored 2 goals in the Premier League on the Friday night, surely you're going to be thinking, well, where's Josh Sargent?
Yeah, I think you are. I mean, I'll try and stick up for them a little bit, because I would argue that maybe before this game that there was maybe no real evidence that certainly as a central striker he would maybe offer the goal threat that we hoped he would. And we've spoken about him a lot on this podcast, so maybe I'll stick up for them in that regard. But you're right, and this is the kind of performance that he'll need to produce on a more regular basis if he's going to get back into his kind of international fold. It was excellent, I thought. And it wasn't just the 2 goals. There was a couple of surges in the first half, which were really positive. There was a lot of work out of possession that he did was really good. But
he won a penalty in like the first minute, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly that. He just looked like it was kind of his night, and it looked like that from kind of the first few minutes. And he's had to be patient, and he's had to endure a lot of criticism, and let's be honest, ridicule as well at times. I think that's fair to say, but he's not once kind of shied away from it. He's continued working hard. He's a willing runner, as we know. He's been a little bit unlucky as well with the bounce of the ball, and obviously that miss against Brighton, which was massive. And if anyone deserved that ball to hit his foot and hit the underside of the bar and bounce to the right side of the line, I think it was probably Josh Sargent after everything that he's had to deal with this season. It was just a really glorious goal and a really glorious finish. I've not seen, maybe you guys will shout at me, maybe the people listening to this will shout at me, but I've not seen a Norwich City player ever score a goal like that, certainly in my lifetime. In terms of that style, it's a really unique strike, I think, and there's definitely luck involved, but he's got his leg that high up in the air. He's made contact, and the way he almost cushions it and takes the pace off it just completely catches the goalkeeper out. and fortunately it bounced the right side of the line. The second one for me though is probably more impressive because that's a proper centre forwards goal, as you referenced, Dave. We'd associate that kind of goal with Grant Holt, Ewan Roberts, other Norwich City strikers of yesteryear, really. And it was, his jump's almost completely fueled by confidence and belief that he discovered from that first goal. And we were speaking to some people inside the club before Christmas who felt that actually a goal would maybe change how people viewed him, but also his game as well. And it seemed to, on the indication of that second one, do that. And what we saw him do was make more intelligent movements. It was maybe about making his runs a little bit later, timing his runs a little bit differently. We saw that with both the first and the second goal, which allowed him with the first goal to deal with a cross, which, let's be honest, wasn't great. He made it look great, but it wasn't. It was probably a bit behind him, and he was probably expecting it to be flashed across the floor by Pukki, and it wasn't. But he dealt with it and he improvised, and it was a brilliant bit of improvisation. And the second one, the ball is almost with Kamara by the time he kind of begins his run. It's an excellent timed run, and because he times it that way, he gets the jump on Kamara and he gets a real height on it and connects with the header beautifully. So a really impressive set of goals. He deserves them, and hopefully now this is the start of Josh Sargent in the Premier League for Norwich City, and we see him go on and score more goals this season. But the narrative and obviously the surroundings of him becoming a dad a week or so ago, I don't think he could have written it. So really pleased for him. But yeah, he will have his eye on probably not just the USA, becoming a USA regular, becoming a Norwich regular as well. I think there's probably been some debate around his role. He's obviously been playing on the right side. I think we're all in agreement that is where he's looked best this season, rather than a central striker. But with Norwich playing a 2, it's not beyond the realms that he could work his way back into that at some point. So yeah, a really, really good night for him. Really pleased for him after everything he's had to endure this season. And hopefully we see him go on a little bit of a run of goal scoring form, if not performances like we've seen with Adam Eder over the last 3 games. And that ultimately will be a good thing for Norwich, because we've spent so long discussing where the goals are going to come from, and the fact that beyond Teemu Pukki they didn't really have one. Well, in the last 2 games, Josh Sargent and Adam Eder have come up trumps, and that's really important from kind of the perspective of Dean Smith, I suppose.
Yeah, I think Smith will be perfectly happy for him to not go away, won't he? I mean, it might mean it probably would mean he'd miss the FA Cup game. He should be back for the Palace game without a problem. But yeah, with COVID and all these sorts of things, if you're Dean Smith, you're quite happy for him to not be getting on a plane at the moment, aren't you? And resting up and conserving some energy, because that's the key part of his game. A two-pronged question, I suppose, for you, Pad. Firstly, on reflection and seeing all the replays, do you think Pukki was lucky to get away with the challenge with Kamara? Because I felt in real time like he was already going down, like he was trying to win the foul. But the more I look at it on the replay, I think it was the right decision. But I think probably 8 or 9 times out of 10 it gets given. And secondly, I said this in the car, and I'll bounce this back to Connor afterwards as well, but I still think that Pukki's goal at Newcastle was better. I still think that's the goal of the season at the moment. I've seen some people talking about Sargent as being a Puskas Award contender. I think because, like Connor set it up there, in terms of improvisation and adjustment, I think there was a degree of luck to it. It was wonderful and it looked brilliant. And because of the narrative around it, because we're all so pleased for him that it broke his duck and he's away in the Premier League and stuff, that we've all probably celebrated it more than it would have been if it was his 12th goal for Norwich or something like that. So yeah, the foul and where does it rank for you?
Well, take the second one first. I mean, also the context of, that goal in that game, what it meant as well. I think that elevates it as well. Goals for me, it's the aesthetic of the goal, but it's also the context and how important they are. I know from Redmonds' goal to make it 2-0 in the playoff final after a brilliant team goal, that what that meant, essentially more or less secured Norwich in the Premier League. But ultimately, you break it down, he's hit a ball, angled it across the keeper from 16 yards. It's not aesthetically a great goal, but what a goal in Norwich's history. Yeah. This, in time, as I say, let's not get overly carried away, because they need to back it up now. But if Norwich in May, we're looking back and they are in the Premier League, that goal right there, that could be the watershed moment. As much as the Everton one was a line in the sand, to go to your direct rival and perform like that, and for that to be the first goal on the way to that win, that could in time go down as a massive goal. I I don't know. I'm not really, I'm not really willing to say that was pure luck or that he didn't mean that. I thought it was an excellent goal. I thought it was an excellent piece of improvisation.
I think he meant it, but I just think there's an element of, because he had to improvise and stuff.
You could say that about any, trick type goal, couldn't you? That there's an element of, there needs a bit of the fact that it kisses the underside of the bar instead of the top of the bar and flies over, or it kisses it at an angle and it bounces down on the line and comes out. They're all elements that he couldn't really control. But I just thought to have the speed of thought, and the agility and the athleticism, because he's obviously, if you look where he's connected, it's quite high up on his body, obviously, as well. I think all of those things, to compute that in the fractions of a second he had from the time that Pukki's ball comes back from the byline, I just think that's an excellent goal. And for me, the more surprising element is it's so far removed from the as I described it at the weekend on the app, the brain freeze and we saw against Brighton, where he had essentially an open goal, and I still don't quite know now how he ended up executing it in the manner he did. But they always used to say about Ian Wright, actually, prolific goal scorer, but he needed to be, it was almost Andy Cole, another good example, Andrew Cole, United. If they had too much time to think about it, they were never quite as deadly as a striker. And we really haven't seen enough of Josh Sargent in terms of goal scoring to sort of maybe make that definitive conclusion. But is he an instinctive type of finisher? If he has to think about it, if he's going through on goal, if he's got time to see the keeper advancing or time to take a touch, doesn't look to be as convincing. But there, where it was no option, he couldn't take that ball down. He literally had one attempt at trying to get that ball on target, and it paid off. And yes, okay, as I say, there was an element about how beautiful it looked when it kisses the bar and bounces down. That just added to the sort of appeal of that goal. But the header was tremendous, a tremendous piece of athleticism as well. Again, to time the run and to get that high off the deck and then control that header, it's just completely out of kilter with what we've seen from that man in terms of a goal scoring threat. So will the real Josh Sargent stand up from now? And you just hope it is the confidence he needs to go on, because there's no doubt those two goals tell me that there's a technique which hitherto we probably haven't seen anywhere near enough of, that he can actually score goals at this level, and that is a bit of a revelation, because as Connor rightly said, talking about the US situation, I don't think he really had done enough prior to be anywhere near the US squad, because he's offering very little in terms of goal threat up to Vicarage Road and what we saw there. So final one. Is it? Yeah, again, it's the debate. Aesthetically, I think Pukki's is the technique on that is unbelievable. What a finish that was. But for me, I'd still go with Sargent because of what it meant in the context of that game. Yes, okay, that salvaged a point against Newcastle in a game they should have actually won, given how that played out with the man sent off early on at St James's. But how big that game could be for Norwich at Watford, that goal, I think that edges it for me. And really, there's not too many other contenders in terms of goal of the season so far. So I might slightly disagree with you, Dave. I'm going to go, that is, for me, the goal of Norwich's season so far.
There we go. That's what it's all about. A bit of debate. It's going to sort of be iconic. The freeze frame of when he's just making contact and his arms in the air, it looks like he's doing the tango, doesn't it? It's a brilliant image. We tweeted Ewan actually as well about what he thought of the goal, and he said that's how you attack a ball. And then a few hand clapping emojis in terms of the second one, the header, because that was a really satisfying goal as well. Rashica did well, decent pass from McLean down the left as well. But we've gone down this route now. Then Connor, what are your thoughts? Because I just think with the Pukki one, because that overall with Newcastle, the narrative of it ended up being negative, didn't it? Because that was such a big missed opportunity. They really did mess up that night. But just the purity of the volley from Pukki, he really did put it postage stamp top corner. That would still just get my vote for goal of the season if we were doing it today.
Yeah, it's a nice. First of all, it's a nice debate to be having after 9 hours of football without a goal. So I'm glad we're actually talking about this and we actually have some goals to rank first and foremost. But the thing I have with it, I keep coming back to the uniqueness of it and the fact that I've not really seen a Norwich player do it before. I have seen players score goals like Teemu Pukki scored against Newcastle, so maybe that is what's placing it above it in my mind. I just think it's. To be fair to Sargent, I think there, as Pad alluded to, I think there are elements which helps. The fact it hit the underside of the bar instead of kind of looping into the net quite slowly, I think it just adds to the aesthetic of it. The fact his leg was so high, the general physics of it, I think was good. Which is probably harsh on Pukki because, as you say, the strike was so sweet and he connected with it so well. He was probably the only player that night from a Norwich City perspective that could have done what he did in that moment. And once again, we talk about Norwich City goals and big moments in seasons. Teemu Pukki's involved, irrespective of if he's scoring or not. But yeah, I mean, back to the debate, I think I probably side with Pad and put the Sargent one ahead of it, just because basically I try and rank goals on what I think or people generally couldn't do. I think you could probably hit a strike like Pukki if you tried 20 times. I'm not sure if you tried 20 times you could maybe do the Sargent one. I certainly couldn't anyway. Maybe I'm thinking about it too deeply, but yeah, in terms of uniqueness and whatnot, I think I'm ranking Sargent just above, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like it. No, it's a good debate because I hate when on like radio shows they stilt debates and they just take opposition sides, but we've just done that naturally there, which I think is always better. And I'm sure there will be a split down the camp in exactly the same way amongst our listeners. So let us know. Get your tweets in. Where's your vote going for player of the season? Let's hope there's some more contenders in the remaining 16 games. But the youngest Norwich player to score a brace in the Premier League since Dean Ashton. So that's not bad company to be keeping either. And pretty clearly everyone's man of the match. And the whole Norwich City community, I'm sure, are totally united in being very, very happy for that young man. 21, just had his first kid. He said after the game that it's a little girl called Romy. And he was looking forward to getting home to his wife and baby so that he could, really sort of savor the occasion. And yeah, hopefully better times ahead for him, because that was a difficult first 6 months. That Brighton miss will have haunted him quite clearly. But he's far from the first Norwich City player to have a difficult start to their career with the club. And well, Ewan is a perfect example. Ewan has said many times that his first season was a bit of a disaster with the club, and he really didn't show what he was capable of. But from there, we all know he went on to be an absolute solid gold legend. Right, let's just look at the game a bit more widely then, and Pad, the sort of big, I suppose it didn't, not necessarily a turning point, but the big incident from a Norwich point of view after a bright start was Jacob Sorensen having to go off eventually in the 21st minute. Kenny McLean coming on. We're waiting to hear how bad Sorensen's injury is, aren't we? But I sort of felt for Kenny that he knew coming on at 0-0, if they'd have lost that game, he knew full well that he was going to be getting a lot of the blame for it, didn't he?
Yeah, no doubt about it. But also the way the game shifted, the dynamic, because it was almost pre-Sorensen. Norwich, as we said earlier, started the better of the two sides. Dean Smith talked about they were very keen. He talked about setting traps in terms of how they pressed and where they pressed. They wanted Watford's back four to have the ball. And they achieved that brilliantly. And the turnover potential, releasing the likes of Rashica, releasing the likes of Sargent, you had Ida dropping deep, Pukki with his movement. It just felt very fluid, very promising in terms of the final third. And there was glimpses of that. And actually the incident in which Jacobs got the injury was him pressing on the edge of the Watford box, block tackle, ball pops back out, Sargent passes it through to Rashica, he clips it over, first time right foot from the edge of the box. And he tried to play on, but he wasn't able to really, and he had to give in the end with what Dean Smith said was suspected medial ligament damage, which would be concerning, no doubt about it. And I'm sure we'll find out in due course how long he's going to be out. Hopefully, it's more positive than not. But then, of course, they make the change, enforced change, and really from that point to the end of the first half, Watford got on top, and it was Norwich pretty much pinned inside their own third, and as Dean Smith said, he just felt that collectively they just allowed Watford to play out a bit too easy. They were getting the ball wide. with a lot of regularity, and balls were coming into the Norwich box. He said they had to ride their luck a couple of times, and essentially got them in at half time and had to reset the messaging. Him and Shakespeare and Liam Bramley, you would assume the new first team coach, to get back out on the front foot and get back pressing high with aggression and intensity. And I can't remember what minute the first Sargent goal, but it was about the 51st, was it, something like that? Yeah, so it was very soon after half time, having got back on the front foot. And of course, McLean, we've talked about Pukki's role, but it was as a result of a McLean heavy pass, actually. And, there's some great footage of him with his hands on his head when what should have been a ball through for Timu to have a chance, pushed him that far wide that McLean clearly felt the chance was gone head on hand, stood on the edge of the box. And of course, then the reaction when Sargent does what he does, because he was, he probably was thinking, well, that might be as good a chance as we get, and I've blown it if you're Kenny McLean in terms of the heaviness of the touch. And he was a lot better, I think, thereafter, as the team were. But I don't know. I mean, do you really put it at his door and say, well, if Sorensen had stayed on, they might have continued in that vein? I don't know. I think Watford and Ranieri, they would have responded to that opening quarter. I think they did make a few tactical tweaks, and I'd probably say it was more a case of what Watford did differently in that second part of the first half, rather than simply McLean was an inferior option than Sorensen. And but there's no doubt that's you can be guaranteed if that had gone the other way and it was a 3-0 win for Watford, people would have looked back at the opening 20 and how well they played with Sorensen inside and deduced, rightly or wrongly, that Kenny McLean was a negative there. So for a lot of reasons, I'm sure he was delighted because it was a shame for Jacob because he hasn't had the opportunity really to put a marker down as a Premier League central midfielder, and off the back of how well him and Lys Malou played against Everton, he'd started again in very positive fashion. And you just hope now that for that lad on a personal level, he gets some good news really because, he must feel his career really as a central midfield option for Norwich hasn't really got going yet, certainly in the Premier League. And, if I won't even, hypothesize, but if it was that, he's out for any length of time, then, it might be that his opportunity in the Premier League this season at least is gone. So, that would be a great shame because there was signs there, and let's also name check Lys Malou. Connor and myself was on the Monday Night Club on the app recently, and deconstruct his game, and it wasn't a very positive deconstruction. But give him his due. I thought West Ham there was signs actually, and whether that's maybe the shape they're playing now with a two in midfield or a little bit closer together. But I thought there was more aggression to his game without the ball at West Ham and Everton and Watford. There was a great example at Watford where he's tracked back and retrieved the situation, and as the ball's been cleared out and the players move to the other end, he's got Hanley slapping him on the back, he's got McLean slapping him on the back. Really is almost with him has the penny dropped now, and he understands what's required as a central midfielder at this level with and without the ball. You do want to see a bit more from him in a creative sense, but he's also took a leap forward for me in these last 3 league games.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The header off the line and all that sort of stuff. And agreed as well. I think Watford, because Lys Malou and Sorensen had started with a bit of control, they decided to start going wide, didn't they? And that's when they started to get a bit of joy. So I'm with you that I don't think McLean's addition actually changed the game drastically. I think Watford had already started to twig that they needed to change what they were doing by that point. And for me, I think Lys, if you can have a 2 in midfield, Lys Malou and Norman for me is the one that if they can get them fit and firing, then I think that has got the potential to be a Premier League midfield, which can kick them on. And as we all are now hoping that they can go on to have some semblance of a decent second half of the season, and we shall see. A long way to go with that sort of stuff. Also coming into goal, Angus Gunn, Connor. We learnt that Tim Krul is going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks, haven't we? So he's going to have a little run of it. It was his birthday on Saturday as well, turned 26. So almost a little bit of an early birthday present that he got a clean sheet. And that first half, he really didn't have a great deal to do, did he?
No, I thought he was very well protected. But I mean, the most important thing when we looked at Angus and kind of the run that he's been on, I think it was just breaking the cycle a little bit of the goals that he conceded, because I think, like we talk about Josh Sargent getting a goal, a clean sheet for a goalkeeper, particularly for him in the Premier League. He's obviously got very recent, very painful scarring of games and the goals conceded. And let's be honest, some of them goals in recent games from a Norwich City perspective haven't been his fault, and in the same way the 9-0 wasn't solely his fault for Southampton, but that's bound to affect you as a goalkeeper, as a player. When if you're coming into a team and they're losing heavily, you are gonna take a knock of confidence for that. So in the same way we're talking about Josh Sargent, I hope we're going to be talking about Angus Gunn in the same vein in recent weeks, because he was well protected. There was one shaky moment, if we're honest, which was when he failed to come and take the ball after Josh Sargent was attempting to kind of shield it back to him, and that led to, again, Lys Malou having to clear the ball off the line. But even after that, he set himself well again on his line and pulled off a decent save. All right, it was kind of at him, but he still had to get back into position and be aware of that. So I was really pleased for him. It was really nice to hear the supporters on his side as well, because again, we're talking about players who have had to endure some criticism. He's probably had to endure more than anyone in recent weeks because of, obviously, the difference with him in the side to Krul in the side. Again, there's plenty of mitigation around that, and the fact that Norwich City squad was depleted, and then Krul came in, Grant Hanley returned. They looked a lot more protected with him in the goal. So yeah, I was pleased for him, and I think that'll do him the world of good, if I'm honest. And Norwich are going to need him in the next few weeks. Obviously, the FA Cup game against Wolves, another good opportunity for him, and he's going to have to view this in the same way as Sorensen did, albeit the timing of his injury isn't necessarily particularly good, because he's got injured at a time where other midfielders are coming back. Well, Angus is going to have a running goal now for potentially as many as 5 or 6 games. So it's his opportunity to prove that he can be the goalkeeper that we saw a few years ago on loan at Norwich City, and maybe not the one that we've seen in recent weeks. So if he can do that, then there's no reason that we're not having a conversation in the next few weeks about Tim Krul and maybe him struggling to get back in because of Angus Gunn being in such brilliant form. That's where we hope the conversation goes, and hopefully a clean sheet with the performance that he delivered. And I'll be honest, I don't think he was really tested at any point. I'm struggling to think of a major save that he made, but
the one after the sort of confusion with Sargent, wasn't there, from Hernandez?
Yeah, it was the one I touched upon. Obviously, Hernandez hit the bar late on as well, didn't he? But I don't think he really got anywhere near that. But beyond that, I think he'll be pretty pleased. And like I say, hopefully we can now slowly see a build-up in performance and a build-up in confidence, because I think we all know that there's a talented goalkeeper in there. He's been in England squads. He was a £10 million goalkeeper at one stage when he moved to Southampton. So we all know the abilities there. I think it's just been about finding the confidence, and hopefully a 3-0 win and a clean sheet away at Watford will help him rediscover that.
Yeah, it's all about him finding some rhythm now, isn't it? And the Wolves game could be helpful for him on that front as well. Ahead of some tough games, a game against his former club, Man City, not too far away as well, and sort of reunion with Pep Guardiola. Lots of interesting elements to this one. We haven't even touched upon it yet, Pad. The floodlight failure, and that's 12 sort of nervy minutes or so when we weren't too sure what was going on. Our boss Chris Lakey was certainly getting very nervous back at the office in terms of our deadline, wasn't he? Because we didn't know how long that was going to go on for. But ultimately, the referee, as I think with most of the decisions, the VAR calls and stuff on Friday night, Mike Dean did the right thing in terms of that delay in the end, didn't he?
He certainly did. Yeah, I mean, Dean Smith explained this quite well actually in his post-match that. Initially, it was guidance that Dean and his officiating team were seeking from the Premier League, and thereafter they obviously tried 2 or 3 times whatever switches they had to flick or generators they had to blow the cobwebs out of, or whatever the issue was. Came back on, and then swiftly went back to. It felt like it was half a floodlight was on around the ground. So. In each of the pylons, but Dean Smith basically said at that point, Mike Dean approached him and Ranieri, and as long as both managers, obviously in conjunction with their respective teams, were happy to continue, they would play as was with the light as it was, which was perfectly playable in terms of maybe not the Premier League grade quality for broadcasting games around the world, but certainly in terms of being able to complete what was left of that game, which was a fair chunk at that point. And then I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think towards the end it did kick it back into life, and it was full power by the end, wasn't it? So Yeah, I mean, Dean Smith was asked directly post-match, did he fear that game was in doubt? And he said, no, at no stage did he. It was just really seeking clarity from the Premier League, from the officials. And then when it got to a point where they're not going to be coming back on full power there and then, him and Ranieri both happy to continue, which was good to see. So, yeah, it was... thankfully, it wasn't the last time Norwich had a floodlight issue, which was that memorable for the wrong reasons game against Frank Lampard's derby at Carrow Road. The season they went up. Was it the first time round? The second time? First time round, wasn't it? No, second time round. I'm losing track. First time round, it was.
First time, yeah.
Where they'd gone off late on in that game, they're leading 3-2, and then they return and they get beat 4-3. So thankfully, we'd had none of that shenanigans. It was just another element to a rather unique evening, all told, for Norwich City at Vicarage Road. Sorry.
Indeed. And 4 minutes after that delay, Sargent scores his second. He's doing the cradle the baby celebration, Bebeto style, in front of the Norwich fans, which is great to see. 4 minutes later, Dennis gets sent off for his second yellow card, which I think that was a yellow. Maybe the first one was a touch harsh, but it was weird in the stadium, really, wasn't it, Connor? Because I mean, there was actually a couple of Watford fans came over to us 2 minutes later or so and said, "Did Dennis get sent off then?" Like they barely even noticed, because they were all just so annoyed about being 2-0 down and booing their own team. They barely even seemed to notice that one of their players had got sent off. It didn't get greeted with much of a reaction or anything, but. Really, I suppose as we move towards a close, we should emphasise that this is similar to the Everton game in terms of this is something to build on, isn't it? They still need to be a lot better than this. Watford were missing 9 players in terms of international duty, COVID, injuries. They still, hit the bar. Sissoko had that goal disallowed, which was a lovely finish, but it was offside correctly. That was when the floodlights came back on, wasn't it? Just after that goal, it was almost like they were celebrating. The lights came on, and then they noticed the linesman's flag was up. But you look at the passing stats, all those sorts of things. This is hugely encouraging. We're all quite excited, I suppose, at the moment at the prospect of what could lie ahead if they can keep going in this direction. But against better teams, Norwich will need to play better than that to get results, I think.
Yeah, I would agree, and it's what four wins so far this season. They probably need that again if they're going to stay up. If we're being honest, probably even more than that. I would argue. I think if you get to around 10 wins, then that's usually enough to keep yourself in the division. But what they have done is given everyone some hope, which it didn't exist a couple of weeks ago. It was kind of how badly would they get relegated rather than the possibility of staying in the league, and now it's very much flipped. So it's about utilising this moment, isn't it? And that word you used earlier, momentum, taking that and bouncing into that game against Crystal Palace in a positive vein. I look at some of the games they've got, and irrespective of maybe their form at the moment, they've got a real chance to do something and to do something positive. And that's the way they've got to view this now, as a wonderful opportunity, and they've put themselves in a wonderful opportunity. It's not this Watford win and survival's guaranteed, but what they have done is, as I said earlier, maybe got a foothold on the mountain that they need to climb. You look at it, home game against Palace, Southampton away, Brentford at home, Leeds away, Burnley at home, Newcastle at home, still all to come. So they've got the games to do it. I think that's fair to say, against the teams that they need to beat in order to stay in the league. So they need this Watford game, and they need it again probably 3 or 4 times. And if they can do that, then we'll be talking about Norwich City in the Premier League for another season. Until that, all this is hope and excitement, and they've got to make sure that it's utilised in the right way and that supporters are right to be feeling the way they're feeling at the moment. And the huge challenge now for Dean Smith, and I think you did in your 6 things the comparison between Farke's first 11 games of the season and Smith's first 11 games of the season, albeit a lot of context obviously in both of those runs. But you don't have to be an expert to see that Norwich have improved under Dean Smith, and it does feel like they've got a fighting chance now, and they've got an opportunity to be competitive, and they've got an opportunity to go and get more points. So it's up to them now to do it and to cash in on this positivity and to keep the run going. The game against Palace is going to be fascinating, because if they can beat them, we're talking about 3 wins on the bounce, obviously heading into a very difficult double-header against probably 2 of the best teams in the world, let alone the country. So it does feel pretty significant because, again, if they can back this performance up with another win, then I think optimism and hope will increase twofold, really, and we'll be talking about the opportunity they've got again. So, yeah, this is another step on the ladder, a long ladder that they need to climb, but the top is looking a lot closer than it was before the weekend, and that's the positive thing.
Certainly is. And the Wolves game, the FA Cup game, that is now going to be a real opportunity to prepare for that Palace match, which will be massive. That's the one we're all going to be thinking about as the priority. They've got the potential, hopefully, of Norman, Gilmour, Rupp, Omobamidele and Zimmerman all playing in that game. Zimmerman played 45 minutes for the under-23s on Friday night as well, so that's encouraging. So then Smith's starting to get a really healthy squad together. So those stats that Connor's mentioned there, Pat, if I give you sort of the last word of this week's pod, I'll just go through them quickly. But Farke had 11 games this season before he was dismissed after the win at Brentford, of course, and Smith has now had 11 games as well. He's taken 11 from a possible 33. Farke had taken 5 from a possible 33, so averaging a point a game, which if they keep that going for 16 games, gets them to 32 points. So they will, as Connor set up there, they will probably need a bit more than that. You're probably going to need at least one more win, I'd have thought, or 3 draws if you want to do it that way. Otherwise, it's up across the boards really. In terms of goals per game, they're on 0.7 now, which was 0.45 under Farke. They were conceding an average of 2.3 goals per game under Farke. That's now down to 1.7. So across the board, Stuart Webber is going to be able to point to those statistics and say, look, at the moment, this is looking like the right decision. Until the end of the season, we won't be able to judge that fully. And I don't even necessarily think, this is just a personal viewpoint, that relegation is the total barometer on that, because as long as they're competitive and as long as they're fighting for it, then I think most fans can stomach relegation, knowing about the financial disparities and all that sort of stuff. But yes, in terms of those comparisons and the growth, and I guess really to finish on that, we still hope that there's more to come from both Smith's preparation and from those players.
Absolutely, and there needs to be. But of all that, I would just extrapolate 2 games. Farke's only win in the Premier League, which was Brentford, and pick Watford if you want, another away game against the team you would expect, although Brentford have kicked on still, but to be in and around and amongst you at the right end of the table. And one word, control. I mean, that Brentford win, let's get it right. It was Norwich, profiting in the first half at Brentford, but then the second half was just grim. It was, it really was, a minnow playing a higher level team in the FA Cup to bring it right into Norwich's next fixture, which is in the FA Cup. It was backs against the wall. It was harum scarum. It's Tim Krul diving across his line, and Gordon Banks-esque on occasion. It was just that it was brilliant in terms of the final result, but the manner they achieved that, they took so much out of themselves, and there was a lack of control. There was no game management, if you want to use that phrase. Then you contrast that with what we saw at Watford, which is where we came in on this podcast, where, even before the goals, the manner of the composure that Norwich went about it, the tactical elements that Smith always gives you a little glimpse of in his post-match, about setting traps and, that direction that they're getting from the sidelines in terms of him and Shakespeare and how they deconstruct games, both beforehand and also, more importantly, maybe, certainly in comparison to the Farke era, during the game, the real-time tweaks that they need to make, or the positivity that they need to engender in terms of that group of players in the white-hot heat of these games is different. It feels different. And just ultimately, it feels like now they have a head coach who knows what it's all about at this level. He has kept teams up. He's never been relegated. That's worth reiterating in his career as a coach. Never been relegated at any level. And him and Shakespeare know what is required quite clearly, but crucially, they feel, and Dean Smith's been consistent and pertinent, and we're not even touched on it today, but we're getting to the closing stages of a fairly nondescript transfer window, but Dean Smith has been fairly consistent. He felt there was quality in this squad, and obviously since then, what's happened is the injuries and the illnesses have bit hard, but he feels the raw material is there, and under his direction, you're starting to now see it when he's got the key players available. And of course, Matthijs Norman falls into that category, and hopefully he continues his rehab and is available from Wolves onwards. That it's not only that you have a coach who knows what it takes, but he also feels he's got, as he looks across that squad, the raw material to actually put his plans into place. And the evidence of I'd even say West Ham. Yeah, okay, West Ham were better in both boxes and they had that quality, but then West Ham are going for a Champions League tilt. So, you're playing the top end of the division. But certainly the two games after, Everton and Watford, both off the pitch, tactically, technically, and on the pitch in terms of the quality of the players, Norwich City as a whole look like they are good enough at this level. So now you've shown it. Let's see that for the rest of the season. And then ultimately, it might not be enough, but there's no doubt at all that if you get to the level that we've seen in the last two games, they won't be too far away.
Yeah, Adam Eder was very close to snatching a draw at West Ham, wasn't he, with that brilliant shot that was tipped onto the post by Fabianski. Bad news, though, unfortunately. I've just had a look at the fixtures while you were talking there, Pat. It's pretty unlikely Norwich will still be outside the relegation zone by the next time they play in the Premier League. The fixtures, Watford go to Burnley on February the 5th, which is when Norwich are obviously at Wolves in the FA Cup. Because both of them are out of the FA Cup already. So that's a rearranged game that had been postponed. So that's Watford at Burnley. And then on the Tuesday, the night before Norwich host Palace, Watford go to West Ham, Newcastle host Everton, and Burnley host Manchester United. So it's that Newcastle one that I'm probably looking at mostly at home to Everton. But at least if they beat them, that would drag Everton further into the mire, wouldn't it? And then Norwich would really know that a win over Palace would be hugely significant because they'd be level on points with Everton. So that just this little run of fixtures since the turn of the year, it's really tightened things up, hasn't it? And teams like Everton, Leeds, Brentford are dropping like a stone. I wouldn't have thought Palace and Southampton, but they're still not quite out of it yet. But Brentford are the one to me that look vulnerable. Even though Thomas Frank has just signed a new contract and they're potentially about to sign Christian Eriksen, which would be, a strange situation, but could potentially a real coup if he can rediscover his true form, because we all know that he was a very, very top level player before the trauma that he went through at the Euros that none of us will ever forget. But we will leave it there. Thank you very much for listening to this week's pod. I'll just give a quick plug to PinkUn Plus. If you haven't already clocked Paddy's interview with Tim Closer, then that's very much worth catching up on. The full video is in the video section of the app. The article, of course, was published last week as well. Tim is on trial at Bristol City, we found out over the weekend. So the potential for a 2-year deal in the Championship, which we'll keep an eye on. Nigel Pearson confirmed that after their game. They're sort of lower mid-table in the Championship, caught between relegation and the playoffs, not unlikely to get near either. But that would be interesting to see Closer back in English football. And we've got lots along that similar line that we've got lined up during this 2-week break. So do keep it locked on PinkUn Plus, $1.99 a month. I'm not sure how long we'll still be offering the 30-day free trial. So if you haven't already given it a look, then do head to pinkun.com. There's a tab on the homepage right at the top of the page, which gives you the full explanation about everything. But we're really pleased with how that's going, and we've been getting lots of really, really kind feedback. So thanks very much for everyone who's enjoying that so far. But for now, Paddy, Connor, thank you very much for your thoughts. Thank you all so much for listening. Enjoy your winter break, and we will keep the build up to that FA Cup game at Wolves coming over the next couple of weeks.